Hello, everybody, to the Talking Head edition. I should restart that, but you know what? We're going to roll with it because I
You
think it's
know,
more
you
authentic.
go away for a couple of days and it's like you forget how to talk.
That also happens on Friday evenings, occasionally
Right.
Saturday evenings, and when the Bengals hit all the uprights while playing football on Sundays. It happens. It happens. But as well, people on audio probably have no idea what we're talking about. But to my left is Stephen Rose. To my right would be Paul Thurrott. I think I got that right because it's mirrored. And we have got a special episode here. We haven't talked with Stephen in a while. Stephen, how have you been?
I've been doing good. We're, all cylinders firing, getting ready for Ignite in a few weeks and start to travel again and maybe looking at going back into the office. So life is good.
Whoa. You just said like three crazy things here. You said
I know.
Ignite. You said traveling. And
Yes.
going back into the... Stephen, you live a wild life, my man.
I know. It's sad when those are the highlights of my existence, is doing things that were normal and somewhat benign just a year or so ago.
Hey, you know what? Look, I literally, in thinking about this show, was thinking about that podcast we did last year, and in my head, what came out was, in a way, that the pandemic was good timing, and like no, that's not what I meant. Interesting timing, but it is also interesting, not good, but interesting, that because of the pandemic, some things we used to take for granted are now special, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't wish that it happened. I'm not saying it was a good thing, but it is interesting. Sometimes you need that little jolt to put life in perspective, right? So those things you're describing, going back to the office, traveling, are, Ignite, although I wish it was live.
The excitement of going back to a movie in a movie theater, which we did a few weeks ago. We're like, yay, we're going to a concert next week. Although you have to be vaccinated and have a mask and all that. We're going to a live music event. So yeah, you're right. These are things that you went, oh, I'm going to a concert on Friday. Now it's like, I'm going to a concert. So yeah, it is nice because I do go back in so many things that were just par for the course. You're like, hey, I'm really happy to do this again, and I'm just happy to see people, and whether it's physically, etc. It's great.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's kick it off here, Stephen, because there's a lot has happened, right? We have Windows 11, we have just Teams updates. It seems like rolling out every 30 minutes because there's a lot going on there. We have Microsoft 365. Is there anything that you want to get us started with? We can take this. We legitimately were like, hey, should we script this? Like, no.
He has a new podcast that he is not recording with me, which again is very hurtful.
You're on my next episode. We have Inside Microsoft Teams, or aka.ms/InsideMSTeams. But Paul and Mary Jo and Brad, you've all been guests in the past, and I love to have you guys for my Ignite wrap-up show, which is just a really great way to take a look where we freeform it and really talk about what were the really impactful stuff for IT pros. And we shifted this year. It was interesting. We went from kind of talking to Microsoft insiders to now looking at customers and how they, not why they went to Teams. It's not a why, but how. And it's been really great. I mean, we've had Lego and AEG and the Susquehanna School District and a bunch of folks. And it's interesting to see what they did right, what they did wrong, but also how the pandemic really became that jolt to, we need to do all this now. We need to get our stuff into the cloud. We need to move to Teams. We need to update our technology. And a lot of things happened. Some were ahead of the curve and found it easy. Some were behind. But that journey's been really interesting to explore with a lot of different customers. And that's what we've done on the show. So it's been a great time.
Actually, that falls into that. Sorry, Brad. I mean, that category we were discussing earlier, where there were organizations, especially schools, probably, that were not prepared for this remote learning, remote work thing. Little jolt to the system. Things didn't go well necessarily, but the feeling now is, if something like this happens again, or if this current situation persists, at least we're in a position now where we'll handle it better because we're better placed, right? Because of all the changes.
And I think a lot of teachers have figured out how to use this technology better and how to be more inclusive. They're looking at things like, I want to get a content camera, so I can stand in front of the whiteboard, but people can see what I'm doing, or a close-up camera for what I'm doing. But what's interesting, and it was fascinating, I was chatting with a customer last week, is they said, there's some new habits that have come out. And one of the teachers said, I love the fact that my students can talk to each other during a class, where during a class it's disruptive. But
Right.
whether it's a meeting or a class, people talking with each other show they're engaged. They're talking about what it is we're doing or offshoots. But it's not only doing that, but it's allowing people who were not able to get engaged in the past, people who would not raise their hand to answer a question, or people who wouldn't talk in meetings, to be able to be on the same level as everybody else and now be included. So I think rather than having sort of an exclusivity, there's this inclusivity that having virtual events and meetings and classes brings, where everybody can speak up from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think that's one of those things that a lot of people have realized, that it's really interesting.
What have you been hearing, just curiously? You talked about going back into the office. A lot of companies are still not back in the office. What have you been hearing just from people on the corporate side saying, hey, we've moved to this massive, you could call it hybrid, but definitely remote capable workforce?
Yeah. I think we've had a ton of data that says 70% of people want that flexibility. And they turned to us and said, look, if you want to continue to work from home, you can work from home. When we move into our new offices, you won't get an office. You can come into a touchdown space and all that, and that's just fine. If you do want to come in, we'd like to see you in 1 to 2 days a week if we give you an office. I mean, we've pushed back our date several times. We still don't have a firm date for when we're going to go back in. I'm starting to guess it's probably going to be January, but we can start to go in, and I'm going to try to go in 1 day a week. I'd like to try to run into people or try to schedule a few meetings in person just to relearn that muscle, because it's one of the things that I've just completely forgotten how to interact with human beings when they're sitting in the room next to you. So I think it'll be interesting to see who does what. And I worry about companies that say, yes, we're all going to come back and go back to doing things the way we used to, because I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There was a statistic out, and I can't remember who talked about it, but they said for companies who are going to be pushing like heavily to come back in the office, they said like 20 to 30% turnover in the first 6 months isn't going to be unreasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an opportunity now for people, no matter where they live, to get jobs. A lot of people took advantage of the pandemic saying, I don't want to leave where I live, but there's a great job in San Francisco with Google, with this, with that, whatever, that normally would have required me to pick up and relocate. I can now do that and make that part of my deal. And a lot of folks I know took advantage, both in coming to Microsoft from other places, and people who were at Microsoft looking for their next opportunity were able to look beyond this area, especially if they had kids that were school age like you do, Brad, younger, were picking up and moving as hard. That whole thing was extremely interesting too. And a big part of that, and why companies said, we need to make this hybrid. We need to allow those folks in, because it's going to allow us, when any company wants, to hire the best talent and retain the best talent.
Yeah, Brad just did this actually.
Yeah.
Right. A job offer that wouldn't have made sense if he had to move to Michigan, but because the world has gone remote, now it does make sense. And my son is just out of college looking for a job. I've got a nephew who's in the midst of college, is doing internships, and both of them have spoken to me about the trouble of these Zoom type meetings that they have, and it was my nephew who said this one, but he said I just want to drive there and go. Can I just go there? And it's interesting, from a younger person's perspective, I think a lot of people have been in the workforce for a long time are thinking, you know what, I don't mind working from home. That's okay, and maybe there's some way we can split it up. But I think for kids who have been kind of had hybrid school experiences, and they have not been in the workforce, they want to experience work, right? Which is kind of an interesting place to be in life. But
it's actually a really interesting observation. It really is.
I was just going to say, at that age, that's where a lot of your deep friendships come, are with people at work, social, where before you have a family and that sort of core, that's a big part of who you are and how you spend your time. And not having that, I agree, creates kind of an interesting shift. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. No, I don't think I would have either. It was just because of where they are in life. I've been working from home for 25 years, and to me, the right mix of home, remote and in person is never achieved. You either travel too much and have too many meetings in person in remote locations, or you don't travel enough. And obviously, we've skewed in one direction over the past year and a half, and I'd like to try to achieve that balance I've never really achieved, but We'll see.
I think the hardest thing for me in working from home over, from when we started doing our show and on was just in the beginning, 30-minute meetings back to back to back to back to back with no break, because people were like, would book in time to walk and go do the stuff between buildings. And for the first month and a half, it was exhausting, where I started at 8, it's now 2:00 and I haven't had a break to even get up and go to the bathroom. So what we did was we added a featured outlook where you could start meetings 5 minutes late or end them early. And we made 60-minute meetings now were 45, 30-minute meetings were 25. And we made Fridays a no meeting day for the whole cloud work, which was awesome. Where that was your day to get caught up on email. If you wanted to do a meeting, that's absolutely fine. But you had to understand that somebody may not accept that. And because we were realizing we were doing 5 days worth of work in 4 days. Right. At least from a meeting standpoint. And that has dramatically changed things. And not all did that, but
I think there's also people in organizations trying to justify. It's like, well, we're working home, but don't worry, we're really working, and we're going to overdo it with regards to meetings and showing up and that kind of thing. And, like I said, working from home for so long. I mean, one of the things I had to wrestle with a long time ago, and I'm just used to it now, was it's okay if you have to stand up and walk around the house or go eat or something or whatever it is, do laundry. Get your mind on something else, and it's okay. You're not, short thrifting work or whatever. It's okay. Yeah. And I think there's an aspect to that on both ends of the equation, because from an employer's perspective, it's risky and scary in a way that people are just home. What are they doing? Are they eating a bowl of cereal and watching TV all day? Are they, screwing off in some way? And everyone's different. I mean, different people need different forms of interaction. Or more of this, less of that, or whatever it is. Some people maybe need to go to an office, just psychologically. But I feel like I think we've figured that stuff out. I mean, if again, not that the pandemic was good, but it is interesting. We've been tested by fire here, and I think all of us kind of understand where we are personally and what matters most to us and what makes the most sense to us from a work perspective.
Brad, how's onboarding been for you with a new company that's remote, not being there? Because that must be a really interesting experience, something I've never done. So
so it's different. I mean, I believe our official policy is right now is you can work wherever, whenever, just like, very similar to Microsoft. Like there's no official mandate, like anybody's got to be in the office at any time. You just got to make sure you're working. I mean, that's sort of to Paul's point, like you got to make sure you're working, but do it wherever. Conveniently for me, like I actually go up to the office quite a bit. It's not super close. It's about a 3.5-4 hour drive. So I'm not doing this every week or every day, but actually this week I went up because I can just wake up and drive and be in the office for a couple days and come back home. So when I did true onboarding, I was in the office for 2 or 3 days just to try to meet the team, get familiar with the tech stack, get everything up and running. But I am majority hybrid. I mean, we're using the Microsoft stack for the most part. We use Teams extensively. I mean, I've probably learned more about Microsoft Teams in the past 6 weeks from.
Are you saying that our small company hasn't exercised Teams to its limits and that there's more you can do?
Yeah, I'm kind of saying that. I mean, it's to be honest, one of the shockers, because I went here's like my life. I went from corporate America for my first part of my career to I ran a startup working in media, and then I've been with Paul for the past 6 years. And when I left corporate America, everything was email. Every single interact. I think candidly at Stardock, I have probably sent maybe 10 emails in over a month. Wow. Everything we do is in Teams except for explicit external communication goes through email. And to me, that has been like, now I understand how the truly hybrid environments are operating, because it's just like having a natural conversation. It's not so formal with email, and things work better through conversation rather than, because email to me is still very, very formal because everybody includes their signature. It's a very stand-up-y process. So just that sort of relaxed style communication has made things a lot easier because we have teammates all over the globe.
Doesn't email sort of remind you now of sending a telegram or something, right? Yeah. You send it off into space across a wire or whatever, and then you wait. Yep. And eventually maybe there'll be a response. Sometimes there are no responses, and you have to
Nudge.
ask again, send them a nudge or whatever. But yeah, there's something to this real-time communication when it can happen. And this notion that if someone is not there at the time, right, they will pick up, like they'll see it and it will happen. I drop a lot of emails now. I mean, obviously, like Stephen and, all of us, I guess we grew up in the age of email, and that to me is normal, but I've adapted to this new style of communication very easily, and I find it very natural.
Yeah, an interesting story that I share with customers and things like that was when I moved over to OneDrive, I wasn't working with marketing folks, I was working with engineering. Engineers are younger and they work very, very differently. So I had an issue with something. I sent an email. 3 days went by and I didn't get an answer. So I pinged them and said, hey, I emailed you the other day and still haven't gotten an answer. What I realized was I'd get an answer, I'd have another question. It would take a week to solve something. It's like, yeah, we don't use email over here. He's like, we're using this new thing. At that time, it wasn't Teams. This was before Teams. And then later it was in Teams. But they're like, chat with me. And then what happened is I'd go, hey, I have a question on this. And they would pull somebody else in to answer the question and then move on. And I realized this is a generation that's grown up on chat, on phones, that they don't see a difference between a phone and a PC. It's a way to get your stuff in the cloud. And that's how they did it. Like, I want to answer this and be done with this and move on. And donuts in the break room. That's an email. Hey, I have a problem with this. That's a chat in Teams. And it's really changed how things that are urgent or things that are more converse or that could be not read the correct way in an email. It's much easier to say, hey, quick question on this, where do we stand, and know you have that and move on, rather than an email that it's going to be 4 or 5 days. It's more for documentation and, hey, here's what we're doing, or be aware this is happening kind of stuff. So what we do now in email and what we're seeing companies do in chat, including myself, has really changed. And you're right, I'm seeing email go down and chats go up. And both have that level of documentation, which is why so many people would send emails about things, is they go, I want to be able to go back to it. And you can.
Right.
Yeah. So the way Stardock operates is there's effectively, we use the Teams functionality extensively. So there's it's almost, some people are going to wince at this, but it's almost like you have multiple inboxes, and it's actually a big benefit, because we have a thing for your donuts example. We have an announcement channel, and so it goes in there, and I don't open my email and I'm just barraged with 75 different things, varying different projects. Like, I know that when I'm on this team or in here, we're talking about this project. It's helped me just stay aligned, especially as I was drinking from the fire hose.
Right? Some of it isn't. I mean, the donut thing is not important. Maybe it is important, but it's not as important. Like, you can tell by the group, I really need to pay attention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And Brad, do you ever feel bad if they say there is donuts in the break room, but because you're remote, you can't get to the donuts?
Yeah, sometimes, because what they do every Tuesday, there's new snacks. Like, the snacks get refreshed on Tuesday, and so every Tuesday I see there's apple cider muffins or something, because there's a lot of apple orchards in Michigan, and so
I grew up in Illinois, so
okay.
I'm familiar with that.
I'd like to hear the conversation that you have with your wife when you explain why you have to move to Michigan is because the snacks are refreshed on Tuesday.
Correct, and they're happily. Honey,
it's a perk.
I know there's a lot of snow and horrific cold, but apples.
Well, yeah. See, the apples will be gone by then. Then there's no reason to go. That's how they get you back into the office.
No. Then you have hot cider all winter. It's a whole apple cycle. I think you need to understand how this works.
Well, let's check back in 12 months, and then I'll have a full calendar year under the belt. And I'm trying to think, in the spring, then we'll have apple pie. I don't know what do you drink in the summer? Like carameled apple or candied apples, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
This thing called apple juice.
Oh, apple juice, right?
It's nice, yeah.
Apple cider, like a spiked apple cider, perhaps.
Hot toddy, absolutely.
Well, speaking of things that are coming up, besides the apple cycle on a tree, we also have Ignite coming up here in not too far, right? I keep wanting to say Ignite's a couple months out, but it's right around the corner.
Less than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, big question about Ignite, if you don't mind. Yeah. Because last year's Ignite was split into two, and there was a November event, I believe it was November, and then there was one in the spring, maybe March, if I'm having a hard time remembering when these things were.
Yeah,
we've kind of lost the notion of Ignite 2021, right? So this is sort of like Surface Pro 5, where it's just It's just Ignite.
Yeah.
Like we're not, are we going to, do you see this show always going on this path going forward? Has that changed Ignite forever, so to speak? Or do you think
Yeah.
we get back to that once a year cadence again?
I think at some point we may get back to that once a year cadence. I think it's certainly easier to do it twice a year virtually, but I think what's really been good, and this is something that I learned and that we focused on in Jeff Teeper's org, was we had too many years where we'd announce a bunch of stuff at Ignite, and then the next year at Ignite, we would say, hey, guess what? We're now ready to release this and talk about stuff. And the great thing about having a 6-month cadence is we are able to turn around and say, hey, 6 months ago, we talked about all these features, and look, 99% of them have been released. We've actually done it. And I think we've done a better job of, rather than do this big vision and then have things change in the industry or engineering priorities change, it's much easier to say, yeah, within 6 months, we can do this and we can do this well. And I've always said, we break things down between evolutionary features and revolutionary features, the ones that are logical and are going to move the product forward, and then the other ones that are no one's expecting, but actually deliver those. And I think that's one of the best things is we're not coming back and, we can say, look, remember all this cool stuff? It's all out. We did it. Here's what the next 6 months looks like with kind of a 1-year idea of where we want to go, but this is what you can expect in the product. And we've gotten much better at that. And I think that's one of the forcing functions of Ignite and management and conversation, saying we have to stop doing this. We should say, what can we actually deliver? Let's talk about that and do that. And because we have that audience attention twice a year, it's much easier to do that with a shorter runway than to go, hey, we have one shot where we've got to make our competitor scared, or, really show innovation or do all this and get people. With that second chance, it makes a difference. So maybe we have one live and then maybe we have one virtual or hybrid.
Yeah.
Who knows? I think we could do that, but it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities in who can come to the conference, who can get that information, and how we do that. And it's gone really from being a technical learning to more, here's the highlights, here's some deep dive, but then even more emphasis on our resources for self-learning and things that you can do to learn all this stuff too. So it's had some good forcing functions, and I'm curious to see where Bob's team takes this in the future.
Interesting.
I think we're all interested to see where, just because, to Paul's point, and where you guys hit, like we're approaching that cusp of like heading back to what we considered mostly ish normal. Obviously there's going to be long-term changes. It's like, are we going to go back into that usual conference cycle where we have Build in the spring? We have my favorite conference every year is Ignite, a huge extravaganza in the fall, but we'll see what happens.
It's great on so many levels, that's the thing. And I think this is what I miss, right? So there's a travel aspect to it. Sometimes it's not a particularly interesting place, right? Like Orlando, maybe, or whatever. But you have to, you have to go where there are certain, numbers of hotel rooms and so forth. Yeah. But so there's that part of it. But there's also the reunion aspect to it, right? As I think of it, people in my position who are outside of Microsoft get to see other people who do what I do, which is, 2-3 times a year. Usually, it hasn't now been 2 years or whatever. People from Microsoft that we know, people from outside the industry or others, other parts of the industry. And man, do I miss that? I really miss it. And it's weird because I don't really like crowds, or, and some people would say I don't really like people. But the thing is, the past year and a half, not being able to see all those people it's been hard, and so I look forward to that return whenever and if ever it happens.
Yeah, I have a ton of conference friends, and they're people who we squeeze a year's worth of catch up, and I know their wives, and I've met them, and I'll break bread with them and have a meal and catch up and see those folks. And that's what keeps that relationship alive, because I'm always excited to see them, and I follow them on social, so I have good ideas what they're doing. But I miss that. I really do, seeing those folks and running into them and catching up, and what have you been up to, and hey, that has a great idea, I should bring that back. And then also sitting in the booth and just having everybody come to us with what they like, what they don't like, what's working, what isn't working, because that really is so important for me. It was every 8 weeks I should be speaking at a conference or meeting with people, but getting feedback on what we're missing, and what are not just what we're doing right, but what aren't we doing right? What are we missing? Or sitting down with somebody and saying, hi, you are one of only 20 people who this is important to.
Yep.
I get it. I know this is your world, but in the big world, this is probably not going to happen, but it is important. So what can we do to solve that issue? Not a good conversation to have over email, but a conversation over a cup of coffee or a cocktail you can have and really,
Oh, it's huge for those people too. Do you know
Yeah.
how big it is to speak as a random IT person in some company, wherever it is in the world, and to go to a show and meet a person who works on the team, the product they use every day, and to be able to just, it's almost like go to a therapist, right? At least I know someone has heard me,
Yeah.
It's huge.
I understand your pain. I share your pain. I get it. I'm not going to be able to take away your pain, but look here, there, and let me make it better. But here's what we are doing that I think can do, or here's what other customers are doing, and something you may want to look at differently. And I find those sessions are really important. And I have built long friendships over telling people, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, but what can we do in helping them to find a solution? So, yeah.
Interesting conversations. That's what we're having. Now, Stephen, I know we talked about it a little bit, but you have a podcast and you talk a lot about teams. You want to just tell us a little bit about where we can find that information?
Yeah, it's at aka.ms/InsideMSTeams. So pretty easy to find, which is great. We've been doing this now. We're in our 4th season, so that's a little bit more than 2 years. Paul and Mary Jo are going to be on for our Ignite wrap-up, but we've had some great guests, and it's really geared towards IT pros. Think of it as not that 400 level that Chapman does in mechanics, and I love Jeremy. He was a guest on my show this season, but it really is the how did you do it? How did you get people on board with this? How did you solve this problem? Why did you choose this? What were the big things in trying to use a third-party MFA with this tool? How did you get your internal users to use this? And what's interesting is a lot of people don't realize that after pilot, the next step is not deploy, it's adopt, and how to drive adoption, how to get people to actually use this. And that's been a really great conversation with how did you get people to use this, not just for chat and for calling, but actually use it, as a tool to collaborate and to work together in that path and what they've learned and best practices. And it's been some great conversations that we've really, really enjoyed. We've had some awesome customers on. We're going to be doing a panel at Ignite with some of those customers. So we'll have a chance for you folks out there to ask those questions and do that. It's something that I always love and appreciate. And like I said, and we'll do an Ignite wrap up and take a look with you guys on kind of what your thoughts were and everything going on with the show and what looked good and what surprised folks and all that other good stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
As am I, to be honest. I mean, it's always fun to listen to watch other people ask questions. I know that sounds like real obvious, but I can guarantee that if somebody is having a challenge, there's a magnitude of other people who are having a very similar relational challenge and trying to understand how they are solving that.
Yeah. No, we've seen amazing growth in people saying, thank you for this, or that's a really great tip or trick or whatever. We even had a change management specialist come on who had worked for Salesforce and now for Cargill. And he gave some brilliant, and it was one of those shows that I'm like, I don't know how it will do. And it's been huge. People going, now I get it. Now I really understand that I need to understand the pain that each worker has within their own role and how this tool will solve that pain and how I build the resources for them to do it. And it's got to start at the top and work down on those types of things. And it's been really, really great to see the feedback that so many people had on that show and the lessons learned from that. So it's a pretty wide area, and it's been interesting to not just talk about, hey, here's what's new in Teams, which gets old, but it really is, how did you do it? And how are you working with third-party tools and mixing into that when you're not just using our stack and things along that line? And it's great to hear from folks on that.
It's always great to hear from you, Stephen, too. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It has been a while. And I mean, candidly, it's been a while since I've seen Paul in the flesh. It's just been...
Yeah, I don't even know when I was.
But we don't talk about that.
It might literally, the last major event for all of us was almost certainly Ignite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
No, Ignite was the last time that I saw both of you in person.
Yeah.
We did the racing stuff, and you and I did some interviews together, and yeah, all that. It just gets, I really miss it, and I cannot wait till we all get back together and do this again. And as much as I love remote work and Teams and hybrid and all the great stuff that we do all day, I just miss it. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even wore my sparkling brand new geek shirt, not shown on any show before, for your show.
So I'm so glad you mentioned that. I literally was going to make sure to ask you about the shirt. Let me give you a couple of theories I have.
Okay.
Obviously, it's a musical notation. For some reason, what went into my head, and it can't be this, but was Close Encounters.
Ding, 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 ding. You are correct, sir.
Oh, no, are you serious?
It is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It is the board that they have up that shows the colors.
That is literally what I saw when I saw that show.
Nicely
I cannot
done.
believe that's what it is. Okay, beautiful. That's beautiful.
You have gone up a notch in my book.
I said that knowing you were going to embarrass me. Like, no, idiot. It's some other thing.
That's exactly.
Wow.
I saw this shirt and I'm like, not everybody's going to get it because it's an older movie, but it's a classic. It's a great film, and I love the fact that it brings music and science together. And I bought it, and I'm like, I'm going to wear it for Paul's show and see if anybody gets it.
That is beautiful. I literally, not like this month, but sometime this past year, watched the extended version with my wife and was reminded of how great movies can be.
Yeah. It's interesting because Steven Spielberg was interviewed 10 years later on that film, and he said, I could not make that film today because I made that film when I was not married, didn't have kids, and was in a place where I could have I'd gotten out of a bad relationship, or I could have picked up and could have left the planet, would have been fine. He goes, now as a filmmaker, I couldn't do that because my perception of the world and what's important to me is so different.
Not to mention that they don't make movies like this anymore. You can't have that much exposition. People have such short attention spans. You have to just get to the point, and especially the extended version is a slow boil. It's such a great movie.
That's why I love Wes Anderson films. Wes Anderson films are also very dialogue and visual driven, but lots of dialogue. The what else is going on the screen while pretty is not important. So, and they're also like that. But no, this is, if you've not seen it, folks, we encourage you to go check it out. Rent it at your local Blockbuster or whatever. Yeah, just kidding.
It's beautiful. That is really funny.
I'm sure it's on one of the many streaming platforms.
Have you seen this movie, Brad?
I have not.
Please. Oh, you'll love it. It's about aliens. You'll love it.
Well, see, but most movies these days I'm watched with my wife, and so it's always that middle ground of.
No, it's about relationships. It's about it's absolutely worth seeing.
Yeah, it's a great story. Well done. Takes place.
Brad looks dubious. It's an excellent movie, and it's literally about mankind's, like so many movies, mankind's first encounter with alien life. She'll like it too. She will.
Yes. And the awe and wonder of it, not scary aliens come to Earth, but the other kind. So yeah, it's very cool, and it's a nice mystery on how it unravels, and some great cast. You have the famous director Francois Truffaut, the famous French film director, actually plays a role.
That's right.
In the film. Spielberg actually asked him to look at the script, and he said, "This is awesome. Who do you have playing the scientist, the French scientist?" He goes, I haven't cast it yet. He goes, I would love to do it. And Spielberg fell on the floor because Truffaut, he idolizes Francois Truffaut. So there's that whole aspect. And a lot of great actors that went on to do many, many great films, including Richard Dreyfuss in that film. So it's worth checking out.
Well,
could it be more?
Other things that are worth checking out. You'll be able to find links. Not to that movie in the description, but we'll definitely include links to Steven's show. And then we've also got Ignite coming up, and where Paul and Mary Jo and are yourself going to be included in that as well. The wrap up, is that correct?
Yeah, it'll be Paul and Mary Jo in the wrap up. We had to cut it a little. We found last year having 4 people was a little rough, Brad, and I know how busy you are with Stardock trying to reinvent our UI so that you can.
Secretly, I told him I don't want Sam's involved in this one.
Yeah, so
No, that works out perfectly. We'll definitely have links to that when that becomes available here in the coming weeks. But Stephen, we want to give you a big thank you for stopping by here on this Friday. It has been, God, it almost hurts to say it's been good catching up because I don't know when our paths are going to cross, which is always like, you know what, I'll see you at whatever. And we don't know that yet, but we'll get there soon.
I'm always happy to be on your show, and you guys are always welcome on mine, and love seeing you guys, and keep up the great work. I'm loving First Ring Daily. I listen to it in the car, and I enjoy it.
We are sorry, and we apologize.
The sheer futility of that, but thank you.
I do it on Saturdays when I'm running my errands. I pick 1 or 2 of the shows and go through it. So, and I liked your Halo stuff, and your Windows 11 stuff lately has been very interesting, including your thoughts there. So I appreciate it.
Well, we'll catch everybody.
I just want to say this about Windows, and I just want to go back because Paul will understand this.
Yes.
I came on board when we were doing the beta for Windows 7. Everybody said, Windows 7 sucks. We love XP. Then Windows 10 came out. we love Windows 7. 10, Windows 10 sucks. So it's always been this thing, and I will once again go back to the greatest penny arcade cartoon ever, which was his roommate walks in and said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm loading up a beta for Windows 7. He goes, "What is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's Hitler's face and the eyes flash." And he goes, "Well, it's still better than Windows Vista." That was what you thought of Windows Vista, was that it was slightly better than Hitler when we looked at Windows 7. So just reminding everybody, we've hated all the stuff before. We love what we have going. And it's now, 20th anniversary, I think, this week of the release of Windows XP. So let's keep that all, in view.
And unfortunately, you will no longer see any more of us.
Oh.
Be happy it happened.